Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you today. We'll start with a short statement from the Secretary General, followed by the Federal Chancellor.
Herr Bundeskanzler, dear Friedrich, congratulations on your election as Federal Chancellor. It is an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to NATO headquarters just a few days after you took office. Germany is a leading power in Europe, and you play a crucial role within NATO. Your contributions to our collective security are substantial. Germany leads our forward land forces in Lithuania, which you are building up to a full brigade. You conduct air patrols over Baltic skies and provide maritime support for key supply routes and critical infrastructure in the Baltic Sea. Germany is also the largest European contributor of military aid to Ukraine, helping the Ukrainian people defend their freedom and their sovereignty. Your commitment to our shared security matters for Germany, it matters for Europe, and for the whole of this alliance. Just last week, I had the pleasure of hosting President Steinmeier and Minister Pistorius here to celebrate 70 years of Germany's membership in NATO. A remarkable milestone that reflects your dedication and shows that with strong will and leadership, we can change things for the better. You have already demonstrated remarkable leadership, even before taking office, thanks to changes to the debt brake allowing for higher defense spending. A truly historic agreement. This kind of decisive action is exactly what we need to build a stronger, fairer, and more lethal NATO. We need to ensure our militaries have the capabilities they need to deter and defend and keep our 1 billion people safe. So together, we will work to increase defense spending and also enhance the defense industrial capacity on both sides of the Atlantic. Strengthening our deterrence and defense and sending a clear signal that we are not only united, not only resolved, but wholly capable of providing robust collective defense in the face of any challenge. This will be the main focus of our summit in The Hague next month. So we have a lot to do, but I know I can count on your leadership, and Germany can count on a strong NATO. So again, congratulations. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Secretary General, dear Mark.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the warm welcome you have given me here at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. This brings me to the end at a day at the European institutions and NATO. Mark and I have known each other for a long time, and when I was leader of the opposition, I was also always happy to come here. And I'm delighted that I have the opportunity now on the third day in office as Federal Chancellor of Germany to visit NATO. Mark Rutte said it himself. NATO has existed for 75 years. For 70 years, Germany has been a member of this alliance, the North Atlantic Defense Alliance, which is much more than an alliance of defense. It is a political alliance of transatlantic cooperation between America and Europe. And I would like to say that from the beginning, I hope very much, and I also assume that we will be able to maintain and further develop this transatlantic alliance in the way we've done over the last 75 years. This is also my expectation for the summit in your hometown, The Hague, in June, in a few days. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to take our own decisions. It's we, the allies, who decide about our capabilities to defend ourselves, our life in peace and security and freedom. In Germany, we have made a strong contribution to that, but Germany needs to do more. We know that. We know that Germany needs to do more, so we took the decision even before the 21st Bundestag met for the first time, before the new government took up its work to change the constitution and make it possible to enhance defense spending. Clearly, we will now be able to spend more than 1% of German GDP for defense. this will no longer be limited by the debt brake, so we can do what I said in Berlin, whatever it takes. We can spend the money that needs to be spent in order to make sure that we are able to defend ourselves in this alliance. But I also want to say clearly that this is not only about more money. As a priority, we also need to look at efficiency, at increasing efficiency, and I would like to say 3 buzzwords here. Simplification being the first, the second is standardization, and the third one is scale, economy of scale. We need to make sure that in Europe, and it's a European thing, it's not up to the alliance as a whole, it's something that the European NATO partners need to do, that we become more efficient in our procurement and that we also really produce more, that we have this economy of scale. We need more equipment for the money that we spend. And I will point this out again and again, and I will be willing to make compromises, of course, when it comes to production capabilities or capacities and additional gains in efficiency. Mark Rutte and I fully agree. The war of aggression Russia is waging against Ukraine is a full-front aggression, not only against territorial integrity, but against the entire political order of Europe after 1990. And this is how we need to communicate this domestically to our own voters. It is not something that's limited to the territory of Ukraine, which would be tragic enough, but it goes far beyond that. It is a massive attack against our political order. I'm very grateful that yesterday evening I had the opportunity to have a phone call with the American president and speak about these topics. He informed me about his plan for an unconditional ceasefire of 30 days in Ukraine. I fully agree with that. I also know that the French government, the British government and the Polish government see it the same way. There is an opportunity now, this weekend, to go beyond this day, which is, of course, the day of the big military parade in Russia, in Moscow, for which a ceasefire has been agreed. There is the opportunity to go beyond this weekend and have a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Ukraine is in favor. It agrees to that. America has made this proposal. The big European countries explicitly agree, and I think the entire EU and NATO also agree. So the ball is exclusively in Moscow's court right now. It's exclusively there to decide whether there is an opportunity to start at the beginning of the next week with a longer ceasefire in Ukraine and make room for talks about permanent peace in Ukraine. It's another test case, if you will, a very precise one, about how serious the Russian president is about reaching peace in Ukraine. I'm very grateful that we've had such a big consensus here, also with the American president. We will continue to support Ukraine. Also, after a peace deal, Ukraine will need to get support. We will do that together. And as the German government, we will continue to work for strengthening the European pillar within NATO. We have heard you. We know that we need to do more than we've done in the past. We will enhance our defense capacities, regardless of Ukraine. In our own territorial interest, we will enhance our defense efforts. We will have to do so. We will do that. So with the good, right proposals, we go in the same direction. We're looking forward to the summit in The Hague in June. But I would also like to say thank you, Mark, for inviting me and for your work as Secretary General of NATO. It is a very good, very prosperous cooperation also on a personal level. We agree on the political assessment of the situation, and I'm delighted that we will be working together with NATO as a whole and with the Secretary General from our neighboring country, the Netherlands. Thank you.
All right, we have time for a few questions. We'll start here in the fourth row with Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung.
Vielen Dank, Thomas Kutschka, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Ich werde meine Frage auf
Thomas Gutka, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. I will ask my question in German. Mr. Chancellor, the NATO Secretary General suggested to allies a few days ago that they need to enhance their defense spending on 3.5% plus additional 1.5% for infrastructure, for example, and other things that do not fall under the classical definition, which would lead up to the 5% that the US president has formulated as an expectation. For Germany, this would mean a massive increase in defense spending. So my question is, do you think this scope is possible? Do you think that the new federal government could live up to that? Do you have an idea of how many additional efforts would need to be taken, so not only 1.5% for additional military spending, but what comes on top? And in which time frame do you think this would be realistic?
Now my question, and if I may, also a question to the Secretary General. I would like you to explain to us what kind of a challenge it means for NATO member states to actually reach the goal that you have proposed to them, not just the 3.5%, but also the additional 1.5% for infrastructure. Is this basically just a math exam? So upscaling what you already do, or does it mean real new investments? And can you quantify that? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Because I'm not going to confirm the numbers you are just putting out. So I know there are many rumors floating around. It's true that we are having internal discussions now within NATO what will be the best way to make sure that we can fulfill all our tasks as NATO going forward in the future, including, of course, given the fact that we acknowledge the long-term threat Russia is posing. So it will mean absolutely an increase in defense spending, so we're not going to confirm the figures. Obviously, when you increase defense spending, you have to think about all the enabling tasks which are connected to defense. And yes, I've always said this, if we stick at the 2%, we cannot defend ourselves. So we have to really increase defense spending. But that is not enough. We also have to build the defense industrial base. They go hand in hand, because for a strong deterrence and defense, we can defend ourselves now. But to be able in 5 years' time to also be able to defend ourselves and to keep the deterrence and defense at the level we need only to spend much more, but also to build that defense industrial base across the Atlantic, across the whole Euro-Atlantic area, including the United States and Canada and all the European countries in NATO. It's crucial. We need to do both. I said it before, the Russians are producing in 3 months in ammunition what the whole of NATO, which is 25 times bigger than Russia in terms of the overall economy. We produce in 1 year in ammunition what they produce in 3 months. So that's not sustainable. So it is both spending and more production.
Ich will das ausdrücklich unterstreichen. Es macht auch keinen Sinn, jetzt über abstrakte.
Yes, I would like to highlight the same thing. It's not about abstract GDP figures. What is decisive is that we continuously, over the coming years, expand our defense spending. And those of you who are not familiar with domestic policy in Germany, 1% of GDP is about 45 billion euros for Germany. So if we go to 2%, we will almost reach 100 billion, but it will not be sufficient for what we have pledged. So there will be a continuous process over years, over the next years. And I would also like to explicitly say the right answer is not money alone. This is a process that needs to go hand in hand with production capacities that need to be expanded. They need to focus on a strongly reduced number of different weapon systems. We have far too many different systems that cost a lot of money. There are inefficiencies both in terms of scale and in terms of specifications. That needs to be reduced. We need simpler systems. I'm very interested in to see what the industry in Ukraine has been doing in terms of efficient production in Ukraine over the last 3 years under the conditions of a war of aggression. I think we can learn so much from Ukraine. They've managed to do so many things over the last years, especially when it comes to producing drones, for example. We are lagging far behind when we look at what Ukraine is capable of doing. So I think these topics also are very important. So I will not only talk about money if we do not talk about these 3 topics together: simplification, standardization, and scale. That is clearly scaling up the number of fewer systems. And I think this is part of it. We, of course, need to discuss infrastructure as well. Infrastructure that we need for military means, but also for civilian purposes, good streets and roads and bridges for transport measures. All of this is correct. And the Secretary General also said so. We need to differentiate here and not only talk about pure military spending.
All right, third row here, Reuters.
Thank you. Andrew Gray from Reuters. Chancellor Merz, on the night of the German federal election, which you won, you said on national television you questioned whether NATO would exist in its current form by the time of the Hague Summit in June, and you also said that it was clear that the Trump administration does not care much about the fate of Europe. Do you stand by those assessments, or have you changed your mind?
Ich habe nicht meine Meinung geändert, sondern ich stelle mit.
Well, I haven't changed my mind. I'm happy to see that the stance of the US administration has obviously changed, also in terms of accepting or acknowledging what we do as EU partners within NATO. They have acknowledged that we are really stepping up our efforts. So I have more than in February, I have more hopes for the summit in The Hague that we will be able to develop a common strategy together with the Americans. America is crucial for Europe's security, is indispensable for Europe's security today and for a long time being. So the fears I had in the election night were going back to the Munich Security Conference that happened a week before that. I'm very grateful today that I now can be more optimistic about the future of the NATO alliance.
Okay, fourth row here in the corner.
Ansgar Hase, Deutsche Presseagentur. Herr Bundeskanzler, Ihr Vorgänger Olaf Scholz stand.
Mr. Chancellor, your predecessor, Mr. Scholz, was very much stepping on the brake with regard of NATO membership for Ukraine. So what is your position on that issue, especially against the backdrop of the fact that the US president is trying to urge Ukraine, apparently, to give up this membership perspective?
And in this context, also a question to the Secretary General. Do you hope that Germany now will join the group of countries that really support a NATO perspective for Ukraine? And do you think that this could lead to progress on this issue? Thank you.
You first.
Well, the whole of NATO agreed on the irreversible path for Ukraine into NATO, but we never agreed that as part of a peace deal, there would be guaranteed NATO membership for Ukraine. That was never agreed. But in the long term, the NATO alliance has said, yes, there will be this perspective of NATO membership. That's for the longer term, not for the peace negotiations ongoing at the moment. And as I said before, I'm happy that the American president, and glad that he broke the deadlock, that progress is being made, and I completely agree with the German Chancellor on the 30-day ceasefire, and that the ball is now clearly in Russia's court. On the Seite Russias, as I think you put it. That's exactly true. And at the moment, there is a close cooperation between NATO and Ukraine. We have the command in Wiesbaden, which is organizing the military aid into Ukraine. We organize together and jointly the training for the Ukrainian armed forces. We are capturing all the lessons which we are gathering in Ukraine together with the Ukrainians in our center in Poland. So there is a lot happening at the moment.
Ich teile die Einschätzung des Generalsekretärs.
I share the assessment of the Secretary General when it comes to membership for Ukraine. I would like to add that Ukraine has an accession perspective for the European Union. I think in terms of timeframes, this will be before accession to NATO if it happens one day. And it needs to be clear that Ukraine decides in a sovereign way on the path it wants to take. It has decided to file for membership of the European Union. You know the criteria for such an accession. And if Ukraine fulfills these criteria, it is a welcome member within the European Union. Ukraine is and has to remain a sovereign actor deciding on its own political and military alliances.
Okay, we have time for one or two more questions. I'll go to the center here, AFP.
Thank you. Olivier Beau from AFP, Agence France Presse. Chancellor, you just said that Ukraine will need to get support also after a peace deal. So are you willing to send troops to Ukraine as part of the coalition of the willing?
Die Frage, wie wir
The question of how security guarantees could be provided is something that we do not need to answer today. The next step that needs to be taken now is a ceasefire for 30 days, starting this weekend. Then peace negotiations need to happen. We need a peace treaty. And depending on the conditions of such a treaty, the next questions will come up, that is security guarantees for Ukraine. And that is a question that is not topical today, so we don't need to give an answer to that today.
All right, one final question.
Yeah.
The woman just behind you.
Turkish News Agency Anadolu, Selam Valente, to the Chancellor, please. In light of Europe's search for empowering its defense capacity, do you think that Turkey's efforts, strategic contributions, are somehow needed and it should be institutionalized? Thank you.
Vielleicht darf ich das sagen, dass wir bei unserem Mittagessen auch.
Well, maybe I can say this. We also talked about Turkey during our lunch, and we hope very much that we will be able to plan all next steps of the coming weeks, months, and years towards NATO membership. We will have to decide on that question as the federal government, whether fighter jets can be delivered to Turkey. But we share the will to truly have this close connection with Turkey as a big country in our alliance, and I will shortly accept President Erdogan's invitation. I had to cancel on short notice last time, unfortunately, but Turkey protects a NATO area that is of high strategic relevance, of the highest strategic relevance. So Turkey for us is a very valuable, important NATO partner, and I will do everything I can to make sure that this partnership within NATO can be expanded with Turkey.
All right, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Dank.
All the best.